Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good evening to all our viewers on Hilaal TV, DSTV channel 347. My name is Fahraaz Patel, and this is Talking Point. And we are coming from a very special place for a very special guest. We are coming from the Sanctuary Mandela Hotel in Houghton, Johannesburg, because finally, after quite a long time, we have managed to secure one of the great personalities in South Africa. She currently serves as the board chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And of course, you would know her as the former Minister of International Relations and Cooperations. It's none other than Dr. Naledi Pandor. And today, I'm actually going to be her guest, even though sometimes I am hosting many of the guests. But we've decided to make this trip to the special hotel of the great late Nelson Mandela to have this interview. Dr. Pandor, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah so much for making the time, and finally we're getting this interview with you.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and warm salams to all the viewers of Hilaal TV.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Dr. Pandor, it's been a few months, obviously, since you've taken up the mantle as board chairperson. How's the work been so far with regards to that?
Well, it's far busier than I had anticipated. There's a lot of responsibility. Of course, chairing the board. We're holding our first board meeting of the year at this very venue today. And beyond that, we've had a range of activities, roundtables, dialogue series. We had the annual lecture late last year. And then there's work to be done for fundraising, because any foundation requires funds. And we've been quite involved in working on a plan to really improve the financial standing of the foundation. And I'm thrilled also that we've welcomed, apart from myself as a new chair, there's also a new CEO, Dr. Mbogiseni Buthelezi, who's really hit the ground running. So it's been a really busy period.
Yeah, and I've, of course, getting an interview was, of course, quite a mission, because, you know, every time I've spoken to, you know, a lot of the communications colleagues, you know, they've said, Dr. Pandor is quite busy. So alhamdulillah, I'm finally glad that we've got you here. South Africa is still riddled with a lot of social ills, high unemployment, poverty, crime. The foundation in itself, and of course, this is one foundation, when you look at the work that the former late President Nelson Mandela had done, his aim was to obviously eradicate those social ills. I mean, how hard is the foundation working to make sure that it plays its role in trying to eliminate, if not all, but some of the social ills faced within our country?
Well, we're not a large, well-endowed foundation. I hope that we will get to a point where we will have that character. But we have taken on the legacy mandate that President Mandela left to the foundation. And that is really to focus on issues of equity, ensuring that we pursue initiatives that are directed to achieving greater equality in South Africa. This includes matters of race, of youth empowerment, as well as ensuring gender equity. So equity and the pursuit of equality is one aspect. The other is the matter of social justice. And here we have the wonderful Constitution of South Africa. But really, constitutions live only to the degree to which the people they are framed for enjoy the rights contained within that document. So social justice really means we must seek to ensure, as the foundation, that we bring our influence to bear on ensuring that our people in South Africa, all of them, enjoy the full breadth of the rights enshrined in our Constitution. Peace and security is another very important mandate that we were given, and that is really to say to the world, as Mr. Mandela believed, that every person is deserving of human rights, of justice, of human dignity, which is so closely linked to freedom. So these three really form the heartbeat of the work that the foundation does, and we seek to pursue them through a range of partnerships, collaboration, as well as on our own initiating various actions.
Talk of the Constitution, Dr. Pandor. How fortunate are we as South Africans to have these pieces of paper that really govern our country and hold us together, quite importantly?
Well, I think we are fortunate that the founders of our democratic state decided that we will become a country in which there would be rule of law and where there would be pursuit, remember, very important, pursuit of equality. We haven't achieved it all, so at the moment, I think the well-off enjoy a great deal of the wonderful attributes of the Constitution. The poorest among us do not enjoy the full impact of the rights. So there's work to be done for all of us to ensure that, as I believe this Constitution is wonderful, so the person in the most disadvantaged circumstance must also come to feel that the Constitution makes a difference to them.
Dr. Pandor, 35 years ago, actually, 2 weeks ago, former President Nelson Mandela was released from Victor Verster prison, and it was a monumental. I was still a baby at the time, so I don't have those memories. But of course, Dr. Pandor, you would speak of that and how much of a significance that represented in the way South Africa would be shaped at the time. Of course, you had 4 years leading up to April the 27th, and within those 4 years, you talk of the Boipatong massacre, you talk of negotiations happening in Codesa, but those 4 years, if you could remember, just how much of a question mark was put against South Africa, despite the great leader being released at the time, along with many of his comrades, Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, and of course, Ahmed Pedrada.
Well, I was in Cape Town, because that's my home, at that date. And I remember the feeling of absolute euphoria, excitement, that our leaders, were to be released. So freedom wasn't far away,
Yes.
Was our thinking. And so it was a moment of celebration, of hope, of excitement. We marshaled everybody. And we were all in Cape Town at the square, waiting just outside the city hall for President Mandela to come and address us. And what a moment it was. I mean, everyone was trying to fit in to that small space. And we were squeezed. And once you'd found that space, you didn't want to move from it.
Of course, yes.
Because you just wanted to see this man and hear his first words. And I cannot forget the first words that he uttered to us. He said, "I'm your servant. And I'm here to serve you. Tell me what you want me to do for you." At the time I thought, why isn't he telling us where the revolution's coming from? But today I understand why he spoke in that way. He really believed that leaders are there to serve and that they lead with the people. And I think for me that was such an important lesson. And following that, of course, was the difficult process of negotiations, was the misdemeanors of the apartheid state. They continued. We had Boipatong, as you've mentioned, and other massacres, the train murders, which just went on for a number of months. And we found out that the apartheid police, through the Goldstone Commission, were responsible for a number of the massacres. So it was a difficult time, and often, the political process would have to stall because of the actions of the apartheid state. Then there'd be a renewed process. But all along, our leaders like President Mandela faithfully sought to lead us towards civil and political freedom.
One more minute, we've got Dr. Pandor. Servant leadership. How would the late leader view South Africa today, especially the ANC, in terms of servant leadership?
Well, we know before he died that he was very concerned about the direction South Africa had taken, and more particularly worried about the character of leadership, and especially the corruption that has really come to cast a terrible negative light on our country's governance.
After the break, I will continue my conversation with Dr. Naledi Pandor. We are going to be touching on the Government of National Unity. Welcome back to Talking Point. My name is Fahraaz Patel. I'm in conversation with the Nelson Mandela Foundation board chairperson, Dr. Naledi Pandor, and of course she served as the former Minister of International Relations. Again, Dr. Pandor, thank you so much for making the time for us. I want to start on the Government of National Unity. Dr. Pandor, you were once quoted as saying that the GNU was a bitter pill to swallow for the African National Congress. I mean, given all of the hard work and dedication in terms of the struggle against apartheid, I mean, how hard was it to see this electoral decline last year, and the fact that given how governance works in this country, this GNU had to be formed?
I think the electoral decline, while really disappointing for many of us, had been anticipated, because over the last 15 years, it's been quite clear that the people of South Africa have become increasingly disaffected with the performance of the African National Congress, and to some degree, the ANC has failed to repair the faults within it, and this has led to continuing decline. But the level of drop was really a shock for me. I hadn't really believed that all the polls. They had shown a 40% or lower performance. I thought the ANC would achieve at minimum 50 plus one. And so it was a huge disappointment. But it's an opportunity for the ANC to regroup, to show that it can address the fault lines and that it is serious about being leader of society and really pursuing transformation in South Africa. I think there was no option but to go for a coalition. So much as one finds it surprising, disappointing, but I think there was nothing left but to do that.
Dr. Pandor, how does this GNU navigate all these difficult challenges, given that there are compromises that could occur? Bella Act, the NHI, land expropriation, and just last week we saw, of course, discussions with regards to the raising of the value-added tax. This is something new. One cannot compare really the GNU of 1994 to the one that we have now, because one was more transition into democracy. This one is supposedly the preserving of this democracy. So how do they navigate all of this, given that each party has a different manifesto and each one wants to protect its respective manifestos?
I think the test for the GNU has been them showing us the degree to which they will put South Africa first. And what that means is your manifesto may very well have to be placed on the back burner for now, because what's imperative is the interest of our country and our people. So this is a real test to all the leaders. I think thus far they haven't done too badly. There've been, these fallouts, these quarrels, but generally there's a maturity, which just is, a congratulation and an affirmation of the degree to which South Africa has matured beyond apartheid and has become an increasingly robust democracy. So let's see whether in 2 years' time this level of maturity will continue to hold. We hope so, because as South Africans, we can only make dua for the success of our country, because it's in our interest as citizens and residents in South Africa. But I would like to see more certainty from the political leadership of each of the parties as to what is exactly the policy orientation. Where are we being led to? And I think sometimes this is far too subtle for me. I really am finding it difficult to have a sense of, exactly what is the policy orientation, how is it to be executed, and are we seeing a difference from what has been experienced in the past few years, where South Africans have been extremely concerned. So I'd like greater clarity, greater communication, and much more public engagement.
The greater clarity, Dr. Pandor, and this is where, of course, the compromise comes in, and the acts that President Cyril Ramaphosa, as the president's prerogative, could sign. There's still discussions with its GNU partners that which ones are the ones that he could compromise. I know putting you on the spot there, Dr. Pandor, but is there one that you feel he may have to compromise to maintain this political partnership that he has with all of these parties? I ask especially one political party, the Democratic Alliance, because it seems they are the ones that have really taken the president head on with some of the acts that have been signed. But within the shoes of President Ramaphosa, do you feel that there's one specifically that he may have to compromise, or given his role as the head of state, it's one that he's willing to say this could be the stroke that hits the camel's back?
I think it will be very difficult, and that's where the political maturity must come in, because compromise means finding a manner of addressing an issue that is as acceptable as possible. Not everybody will be satisfied, but it satisfies, generally the majority of the group of the parties. With the Education Amendment Act, I believe that they have agreed that they address some of the knotty aspects through regulations, and I'm told the Minister of Basic Education, as she has indicated, is working on this. I have met a number of stakeholders who speak to me and indicate that work is being done to discuss the nature of the regulation. So that one seems to be somewhat steaming along. The other more difficult one of the Expropriation Act is a larger challenge, because this is the heart of the issues of legacy that President Mandela was concerned about, the matter of land access and land redistribution. And really, I don't think you can compromise on a historical fault of this immensity. You actually have to solve the issue of land and access for those who were marginalized and denied access for so many centuries.
The longevity of the GNU, Dr. Pandor, how important is that?
Well, it should survive the period, the electoral period, which is 5 years. And in that time, I'm hoping that President Ramaphosa and the leadership of the African National Congress are working hard to re-energize the structures, to re-energize the membership, to ensure that our voters understand that they must come out in numbers to have a government in place that can execute an electoral mandate and not be in a constant flux of negotiation.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Dr. Naledi Pandor. We are going to be discussing Palestine and her role with regards to its solidarity. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm still in conversation with Dr. Naledi Pandor. And Dr. Pandor, the next segment, I think, is one that is as close to your heart as any other South African, that is on Palestine. December 29th, 2023, South Africa, yourself, the lawyers, Minister Ronald Lamola, who was then the Minister of Justice, you decide it's time to take Israel to the International Court of Justice. How much did that moral standing change everything in terms of the way South Africa stands with its solidarity for Palestine?
Well, this was a decision of the government of South Africa at the time, and I think it fundamentally altered how the world sees South Africa. But also, it opened up a global debate about respect for international human rights law. And this was a very important opening because for many years, international law has been neglected or abused to be used for particular powerful groupings and not to address the interests of those who are oppressed and marginalized. Suddenly, a country of the South from Africa stands up and holds up the highest challenge of international law. And I think this was really a bold step by South Africa in the interest of the people of Palestine. We wish that we could have done this with the entire globe because all of us are committed to international human rights instruments, and we have an obligation to the Palestinian people as an occupied people.
Despite all of the measures that were made by the panel of the ICJ, feels Israel really doesn't care with regards to it. January, at the time, it was January the 26th when those first measures were given, Israel still maintained its attacks in various parts of the Gaza Strip. Why does it always feel like Israel would never uphold international law? It feels that they are, as one would quote it, the spoiled child that can do whatever it wants, no matter what.
Well, as you know, historically, Israel has enjoyed a great deal of impunity with support from the Western countries, largely due to their discrimination and prejudice against people of the Jewish faith. And this is something we neglect, that it is not Muslims or Arab people or Palestinians who have been discriminatory and anti-Semitic. It is Europeans. And they have imposed their fault line on the territory of the Palestinian people without any recourse to addressing the rights of sovereignty of the people of Palestine. And I think that rather than perhaps having a feeling that the International Court of Justice has failed, we should be saying to South Africa, thank you for exposing the impunity. Thank you for ensuring that in an open court where we can all hear and learn, all the evil done is exposed and unveiled to the world. This was extremely important because what it did was it did illustrate to the world that harm was being permitted against Palestinian people by a member state of the United Nations, and in fact a signatory of the very convention that we had brought the case with. So I think we have achieved a great deal, one, in exposing the impunity. Two, Israel is very concerned. I think it's not true. They're used to being disobedient because the world has allowed this. But I can tell you they're very unhappy at being at the ICJ charged with the crime of genocide. It is a huge embarrassment for them, hence their labeling of me as anti-Semitic, a friend of Hamas, a tool of Iran, and so on and so forth, and other lies that they put in the public domain almost monthly about me and now my family. They are harmed, they are hurt by this action, so we should not undermine it. We must persuade other countries to join the case. It must be a global class action because we must finally end the suppression of the people of
And of course, one of the countries that have joined from the north has been Spain, but a lot of the global south countries have also joined this case. Dr. Pandor, the people of Palestine label you as their mother. And it's, whenever you speak to Palestinians, they speak of you with such affection and love. Given that you were an individual that fought against the apartheid regime, how much does that really resonate with the people of Palestine?
Well, I really wish that they would admire our founder of our foundation, who's President Mandela. I know that they do.
What they do, yes.
Because we're just following his instruction. You'll remember his foreign policy statements, which often included the statement that South Africa will not be fully free until the people of Palestine are free. So we are merely following the mandate he has left with us, that while indeed we must embrace our freedom, utilize it for transformation, but we shouldn't forget those who assisted us as we sought to achieve freedom. The Palestinian people, while suffering all kinds of harm, when they were approached by the liberation movements to provide assistance in the struggle against apartheid, they did so with alacrity. They never raised any objection. They didn't ask many questions. They understood oppression and were ready to give any assistance that they could. So I'm proud that our country has been bold enough to stand up, that the African National Congress remains steadfast in support of the people of Palestine, and I hope all South Africans will really come to affirm that having asked the world to support us in our struggle against apartheid, we have an obligation to those who continue to suffer oppression, to assist them in their time of need.
Dr. Pandor, the question of international law, the test of international law is going to come at this time. We've got, of course, the rise of Donald Trump returning to power, threats made to the ICC by not just the United States of America and Israel, and especially to its chief prosecutor, Karim Khan. How important is international law going to be tested in this very fragile moment in our history of the world?
What is wonderful at this time is while we face this immense test, we also have great affirmation of international law. Countries that seemed to be on the sideline for many years, especially in Europe, are suddenly speaking up. Now that the threat has become so weighty coming from the leadership of the United States of America. So Europe is suddenly affirming international law. When they were affirming it in a subjective manner previously, they're now far broader. So we are beginning to achieve something that I've spoken about many times. Part of our problem in the geopolitics is that we've had a strong unipolarity and a real absence of multipolarity. So there hasn't been a countervailing force that could challenge this dominance of the United States of America and its partners in Europe. Now that a fracture is beginning to emerge, I think this is a very important moment, and we need to use it to assert the critical importance of multipolarity, of multilateralism through the United Nations, and the vital need for all of us, whoever we may be, to respect and hold to international law.
After the break, I wrap up my conversation with Dr. Naledi Pandor. Welcome back. We are wrapping up the conversation here on Talking Point with Nelson Mandela Foundation Board Chairperson, Dr. Naledi Pandor, and of course, she served as the former Minister of International Relations and Cooperations. Dr. Pandor, the last few weeks has been quite interesting with comments coming out of Washington. One kind of, to a certain extent, feel sorry for somebody that you know, of course, Ibrahim Rasool, who serves as the ambassador to Washington. How has South Africa dealt with these threats made by Donald Trump and the gaslighting that has not only come from him, but certain sections of the community here in South Africa. And I'm, of course, referring to lobby groups. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, AfriForum, in the way they've been dealing with these accusations against the government. Your take on it?
Well, firstly, I think I'm really shocked at AfriForum that they go around the world talking so badly about our country. And I think they're seeing the results of their work, and they must bear the consequences of that. The harm is going to come to the constituency they claim to represent should the threats of President Trump be realized and we excluded from exporting, particularly our agricultural goods from South Africa, our excellent product, which largely is exported by members and businesses coming through the Afrikaans-speaking community. So I really believe AfriForum has, kind of cut their nose to spite their face. Now, with respect to the way our country has responded, I believe Ambassador Rasool is doing a great job. He understands the United States very well, and I'm sure given the wide network he had established in his first posting, he's using that network to good effect. I look forward to the delegation that President Ramaphosa has announced. He will put together as envoys that will speak on behalf of South Africa in the capitals of the most important states in the United States. I think we should use diplomacy to huge effect and really maximize our interaction with a range of individuals, organizations, and institutions in the United States of America. I'm very glad that largely South Africans have remained calm in the face of this threat. And what we should do is provide education on why we have particular policies and make people aware that there's a legacy of racism and racial exclusion that we are mandated to address by our Constitution. It's not illegal to have land redistribution. It's not illegal to have land reform. It is a stipulation in our Constitution. And so that redress cannot be ignored by government. And we're a country of law. So all that occurs will occur on the basis of a properly adopted statute overseen by our independent judicial organs in South Africa. So this idea that we are a rabid mob of people that goes around murdering our compatriots is an absolute misrepresentation and a really disgraceful set of lies that were told to the American administration.
Dr. Pandor, G20 this year, South Africa takes its presidency. Of course, when South Africa hosted the BRICS summit 2 years ago, of course, you were the Minister of International Relations. How much does the country play its role in terms of shaping global politics and its diplomacy?
Well, I think being chair of the G20 has shown that South Africa is a global player. Firstly, it's the first African country to ever chair G20, and now we're hosting the various ministerial meetings as well as the summit later this year. And congratulations to Minister Lamula and his team on their management of the foreign
You've
ministers
groomed him quite well, haven't
meeting.
you?
No, I haven't, not at all. He's a very bright young man. So well done to them. And, we really are looking forward to the summit going well. The majority of G20 members are participating, and that is great for our country. So it's a wonderful affirmation of South Africa and her people.
One of the things President Cyril Ramaphosa wants to achieve is multipolarity. He wants to make sure that the global south has this equality. You pushed it when you were Minister of International Relations. How important is that multipolarity going to be in the way the world shapes economics and politics?
Well, Brother Fahraaz, people speak of this moment as an inflection point. As I said earlier, we're in a very difficult global geopolitical environment, which is really posing risks for us, but also has opportunities. I believe this is the time for the global South to stand up. You know, I've said before, who are the adults in the room? It's time for countries of the South, with India, with Brazil working very closely with all of us, to stand up and show our mettle. The South is the largest membership grouping in the United Nations. We need to come together as a force of good. We need to appropriate the most progressive ideas about the direction of human development and make sure that those ideas are the ones that have currency in all global formations. So in my view, this inflection point is a moment for the South to show its mettle and strength.
Dr. Pandor, one final question. Where does Dr. Pandor see the world moving given the changes in economics, the rise of the right in Europe, and Africa wanting to make its impact in all spheres of the globe?
Well, I'm very worried about the rise of the right because, of course, it's a negative for all of us, and particularly for women and black people, and for our religion, Islam. And so I think we need to be concerned, and again, we need to be engaging each other, cooperating far more closely. I'd like to see greater leadership from the Gulf countries, from the Middle East, to really guide us on challenging Islamophobia and ensuring that the world understands who and what Islam is so that they accept that we also deserve to exist and to be respected. For Africa, I believe that Africa must now handle its business. We must silence the guns, end conflict, focus on development, and really affirm democracy and development and end this corruption and lack of implementation and capacity that bedevils our continent.
Dr. Pandor, it's been an absolute pleasure having this interview with you, for hosting us. We really, really do appreciate it, and we hope to speak to you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
No, you're absolutely welcome. That's how we wrap things up here with this interview with Dr. Naledi Pandor. From myself, Fahraaz Patel, the rest of the technical team, Tabo Mbeje, Christian, welcome Zwane, Opayemi, Akinlabi, and of course, my producers, Rafio Gamshu and Khawa Solomon. We'd like to thank you for joining us for this special broadcast. From the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.